objective is African Union now. There is no time to waste. We must unite or we perish.
A year before, the Congo had been torn apart by a brutal civil war. America and the Soviet Union backed opposite sides. The policy of the new Kennedy administration was to fight the spread of communism in Africa. In 1960, Brezhnev, the president of the Soviet Union, had visited Ghana. It frightened America's leaders. They were determined that Nkrumah, despite his brand of African socialism, would be their man.
Nkrumah was everything. He was everything, politically, economically, psychologically, culturally, and so on. He just absolutely dominated the scene.
Nkrumah, though, wanted to keep Ghana and Africa out of the Cold War.
President and distinct delegates, it's quite clear that a desperate attempt is being made to create confusion in the Congo, extend the Cold War to Africa, and involve Africa in the suicidal quarrels of foreign powers. The United Nations must not allow this to happen.
But there was the dam.
And I don't think any of us will ever forget it. The following day we all went to Akosombo and Nkrumah let off a vast charge and the scheme started.
Yes, I suppose you can say Kaiser used Nkrumah. But if that makes Nkrumah passive, that would be inaccurate. Because Nkrumah also used Kaiser. The question is, whose end of the bargain came out better? Nkrumah would seem to have been going into an area with so many unknowns. One can say that while he was pursuing power, power slipped through his fingers.
But even as Nkrumah and Edgar Kaiser celebrated, other forces were becoming involved in the scheme. The dam was now a hostage in the vicious confrontations of the Cold War. The American government realized that it was a powerful weapon with which to ensnare Nkrumah. Like the World Bank, the Kennedy administration had agreed to lend millions of dollars to the scheme. In an internal memorandum, the Secretary of State, Dean Rusk, made it quite clear what this money was for. By maintaining this leverage on Nkrumah, he wrote, the US will be in a better position to influence his policies. In public, though, it was called foreign aid.
The problem was that we foresaw that the progress that the Soviets were making in extending their communist ideology, particularly in Africa and to some extent in South America, certainly in the Middle East, and that therefore we had to counter that some way. And we countered it with foreign aid as a defense against the spread of communism.
Bit by bit, Nkrumah's utopian vision was slipping away. The Volta scheme had become something very different from what he had originally intended. At every stage, the project had been shaped not by his idealism, but by powerful political and economic pressures. But Nkrumah still believed it was worthwhile, because once the dam was built, it could not be taken away. In time, it would become the engine of his country's future.
Everyone was hopeful. Those absolutely were optimistic times for hope. Ghana was singular in the sense that it had everything. It had educated people. It had considerable infrastructure, 3 universities, schools, lawyers, doctors. It had everything going for it.
The construction of the dam was to take 4 years. Throughout Ghana, factories and roads began to be built, the foundations of the industrial revolution that would be powered by the dam. But with these trappings of the modern world came other forces that took Ghana's fragile economy even further from Nkrumah's control.
Corruption is not a problem peculiar to any country. I personally feel that the only way in which you can stop corruption in a country is to build up a strong public opinion against it.
Elements entered into the equation that had not been adequately foreseen, and perhaps the greatest of them was corruption. corruption of government and of government people, and corruption, I call it corruption, on the part of foreign suppliers who tried to sell Ghana, in fact did sell Ghana, on investment in substantial industrial enterprises which were not properly designed for the country and did not, in fact, achieve success.
In the early 60s, Ghana became a mecca for European industrialists eager to win large contracts from Nkrumah's government. They began to discover that the easiest way was to offer officials from Nkrumah's party a bribe. This soon became the accepted way of doing business in Accra. What resulted was a rush to sell Ghana anything, no matter how inappropriate for an emerging African nation. Vast sums of Ghana's precious foreign currency were spent on these projects. Then, in 1964, Nkrumah's industrial experiment received another body blow. The world price of cocoa, which had been falling for 4 years, finally crashed. It was Ghana's main source of foreign exchange. The millions of pounds needed to pay for the new factories began to dry up. Ghana, once one of the richest countries in Africa, began to slide into debt.
Show me the river, take me across, and wash all my troubles away.
Nkrumah was an increasingly isolated figure on the world stage. What had once been seen as visionary ideas were now perceived as dangerous megalomania. And his country was sinking ever deeper into debt.
By 1965, it had become very desperate. And I remember we decided to write a memorandum to Nkrumah to tell him the true state of affairs of the economy. I had written that the reserves were only £500,000. He looked at me and said, you didn't check the typing. You left a few zeros. So I said, no, sir, there are no zeros left. This is 500,000. That's all we have in the banks overseas. And he sat back. Then what he did was that he went round the table. He went to everyone who was seated there, the meeting, and asked them, Frimpong says we have 500,000. Is he right? Do you agree with him? And everybody said yes. That was the first time the whole cabinet acknowledged to the president that Ghana was bankrupt.
The river, take me across, and wash all my troubles away. Like the lucky old sun, give me nothing to do. Roll around heaven all day.
Our objective is African Union now. There is no time to waste. We must unite or we perish. I am confident that by our concerted effort and determination...
Kwame Nkrumah was losing both domestically and internationally in his posture. He was practically alone in Flagstaff House. He was really a little bit paranoid. It was really awfully sad. He was even afraid to... I remember they opened their parliament one day, and Nkrumah didn't want to take the chance to drive from Flagstaff House to the Parliament building. He was a prisoner in a sense. There had been a couple of attempts on his life while we were there. So he had reason to be a little bit apprehensive, but toward the end, he was a different person.
On the 22nd of January 1966, the dam was finally finished. Nkrumah organised a massive celebration. He invited the whole country to attend.
The mood of the people at the celebration, the mood of the country was euphoric. There was this vast project which had come in, and they understood it will have a tremendous impact and effect on the country. I felt euphoric. I was quite enthusiastic. I thought a new dawn had come for Ghana.
But all that was happening against the background of a country that already had no money, it had exchange controls, import controls. So it was just like a big emperor's new clothes. Nobody could say that Ghana was broke, but Ghana really was broke.
President Eisenhower and President Kennedy were genuinely interested in this project because they saw behind the cold figures and the rigid calculations that the Volta River project was not only an economically viable project, but also an opportunity for the United States of America to make a purposeful capital investment in a developing country. You see before you, in all its majesty, strength, and power, the Akonsobo Dam, which has tamed the turbulent waters of the Volta.
A lot of us, myself particularly, did not take our seats at the official seating place and watch the ceremony from further uphill. Many reasons for that. One of them was that there was talk of a possible coup at the time.
This is Ghana's Volta River project.